About 6 years ago, I realized how incredibly wasteful the fashion industry is, and when I decided to start my brand, I knew I wanted to do everything in my power to reduce the amount of waste I created. Throughout the last 5 years, I've kept every scrap you can imagine. From bigger pieces to literal threads, I have it all. It doesn't do me any good to just keep everything, so I really do my best to find ways to utilize it all, and today I'm going to show you exactly what that looks like. So without further ado, here's everything I do to reuse all of my scraps and keep my brand as sustainable as I possibly can. I'm sure you're sitting there asking yourself, where do you keep all your scraps? How do you organize all your scraps? How do you keep track of everything? And to that I say, welcome to my fabric closet. Now listen, this closet is pretty clean right now, but I will say, no matter how hard you try to keep your fabric scraps clean, organized, whatever, there's just nothing inherently clean about scraps and like organized and pretty. So this is the best I can do with what I have. And I don't think it's that bad actually, but let's get into it. So I have a few different categories of fabrics, or at least in my head, that's how I categorize them. I have my big rolls of fabric, and those are not in my fabric closet. There's a few like up here, but for the most part, I keep them out because that's the stuff I'm like using every day, the stuff that I'm using for my current collections, things like that. My second category of fabric is bigger pieces, but that aren't enough for like a big roll, so they're folded up, and they are in these bins as well. So it might be 1 to like 5 yards of fabric or so, maybe a little bit less. Things that I can make maybe like 1, 2, 3 things out of, but nothing too crazy. I have those stored away in here. Then we have what I like to call usable scraps. So that's all my scraps from pieces I've already cut out. So think pieces that are about like this big or bigger, maybe a little bit smaller, but things that I could essentially reuse, patchwork, find a way to reutilize. And then my last category of scraps is like the scrappiest of scraps, teeny tiny threads, what I really end up calling stuffing, because the only thing you can really do with it is like use it for stuffing. So those are my categories of fabric. I'm gonna give you a little deep dive on it all in here, and then in the rest of the video you'll see how I utilize my bigger scraps, my teeny tiny scraps, and some of those like weird 1 yard offcuts. So starting with these bins, these are my scrappiest of scraps. So when I tell you, I literally keep every scrap. Like these are like serger scraps. So when you serge something and it like cuts off the tiniest bit, I have quite a bit of that in here. I also have scraps that might be like the tiniest bit bigger, something like this, but it's not really reusable. So stuff like that. And then I have them categorized by color. So here's the black. This is like black and white and gray, kind of more of like a mixed one. This one's all white, and then I also just have like poly filling in here, but these are all white scraps. So when I do white pillows or something that's like white stuffing that I need to make sure there's no color in it so you can't see it on the other side, this is the white that I use. Here I have red, I have green in there, and then I have pink in here. And those are basically the colors I use the most. If I have any other random colors, sometimes I'll just throw them in regardless. Like in the green, I think I also have like browns and blues. If I've ever used orange, it probably ends up in the red. Like kind of do it that way, but these are my kind of main colors. So I do have them color coded there. I missed one. This one also has more of like cream, gold, a little off-white scraps are in here. My next category of scraps are things I can patchwork together. So here are all of my like stretch knit jersey fabrics that I could still patchwork. So all my patchwork tanks and stuff like that, these are the kind of fabric scraps that I use. So like this is from cutting something. You can see they're big enough to be able to reuse. So those are all in here, and I try to categorize them by type of fabric. So those are all knit ones. I do have a lot of them categorized in different bags so they don't mix too much. So these are all my like spring collection fabrics from the last few years. So like this nice little mint green one, the floral one, there's some pink ones. They're all in here in different bags. And again, these are bigger scraps that I can reuse somehow. I keep them categorized this way. So these are all my spring fabrics. Here's a bunch of like my tulle and chiffon and anything a little bit more see-through. I'm not gonna go through every single one because there's too many, but like some of these also have my like bigger rolls. So this is rib knits, sweatshirt material from when I made sweatshirts in the past. Like I do have a good amount of it still. So that's kind of all there. And over here is kind of where all of my bigger bits of fabric are. So like for example, in here I have this roll that's probably like a yard or two of fabric. This is also probably a yard or two. Those type of rolls I do try to keep in here, and I try to like pull them out whenever I'm in need of doing one-of-a-kind pieces or whatever, things like that for markets. I do try to rummage through these bits first. But yeah, that's essentially how I keep track of everything and how everything's organized. When all of my bins start getting way too full is when I'll start to work through all my fabrics, kind of sort through everything and be like, okay, what can I use? Start doing more scrap projects. And so a couple of weeks ago, I did a big closet refresh and realized I just had way too many scraps and I hadn't done anything with them in a really long time. And so that is what we're working through today in this this video is just a lot of my scraps that I have been pulling out from my bins to make room for more scraps, because at the end of the day, you're constantly cycling through more scraps and more fabrics, especially when you're making newer collections and stuff. I'm gonna have a lot more offcuts and things. So I'm trying to remember to prioritize using up all my scraps, because I think it was a lot easier when I first started my brand. I only had very little scraps to work with. I had like maybe one bin of scraps or something. It was a lot easier to manage, but as time goes on and as you make more things, it does become unmanageable in a way. So I do try to slow down and be like, okay, let's make something with all of this and then move on to the next. So hopefully this video inspires you to do a little bit more with your scraps, because there are a lot of fun scrappy projects you can make. I'll show you guys some of my most used ones, especially for my brand and things that I find to be easy to do. I know there's a million other things you could do, but these are some of my most used techniques to kind of get rid of my stuff in a way that makes sense for my brand and for myself and for my storage and all the things. So let's get into it. We're officially ready to start patchworking. I swear most of patchworking is just prep work. The actual sewing never takes as long, but this fabric specifically, I find that it kind of wrinkles a bit. So I do like to iron out my pieces. It also just makes it a lot easier to kind of piece them together that way. So is it the most necessary step? No, but I would highly encourage it. I like to start with my bigger pieces first. So like this is probably my biggest piece, and I just start placing them so that they fit into each other. My one rule with patchwork is that I like to have straight lines, because when you do a lot of curves or like curved edges and stuff like that, the fabric gets a little bit like bulkier. Sometimes it doesn't sit right. So I do try to cut everything down to be a straight edge and then like serge that together, because yeah, I think it just looks really messy otherwise. I don't line up the grain lines. I've been asked this before, if like I keep the same grain line across. I don't, because when you patchwork so many little pieces all together, it really doesn't make a big difference. I would say it makes a big difference if it's really big pieces. If it's just half one piece, half the other, then I would, because it might tug and pull weirdly. But I do find that when you're patchworking this much, it just doesn't make that big of a difference. Disclaimer though, this is only for stretch fabrics. I think I would line up all of my grain lines if I was doing it with a woven fabric, because those just behave a little bit differently. But because these kind of stretch over the body, it kind of works, I guess. But yeah, I just start kind of like moving things around to make them fit. Again, straight edges are your best friend. I kind of like to make a big patchwork block first, and then what I'll do is take my pattern pieces for what I'm cutting out. So this is my baby tee pattern, which I don't sell yet, but it is digitized. I just need to like film the tutorial and put it out, but this will eventually be for sale as well. But I like to make a big kind of square and then pull my pattern in front of it and make sure it fits. Like this block piece is quite big, so it's gonna expand more than just this pattern piece, but I like to try to keep it within like the ranges of the pattern piece so that I don't overdo it. But if you overdo it, you can just, you know, use that for the next time you patchwork or whatever. Like a lot of these pieces are leftovers from me patchworking. Like here, well, actually I don't know if you can see on that side, but on this side you can see there's a few little patchwork pieces already. So this is from like a previous top that I've made. My one other thing when I'm piecing everything together, I do want to make sure I either have right sides out all at the same time or like wrong sides out. You do want to make note of that. So currently I have the wrong side facing up, so it doesn't really matter which one you choose, but just make sure it's the same all around so that you don't accidentally patchwork like right side to wrong side or anything like that. I'm gonna continue kind of placing some pieces. One of the harder parts to this is also figuring out which pieces you need to put together first to then make it fit onto the rest of the pieces. Patchworking is really just a big puzzle, and you're just trying to figure out the best way to piece everything together and make it make sense and make it the most efficient for yourself. At least that's how I like to view it. And then when you're ready to start piecing everything together, I'll take like one piece at a time, grab it, put it to the serger, bring it back, trim whatever needed, and then kind of just go back and forth until you have your big piece that you need. And it's quite the tedious process, so I have to be like really in the mood to do it, because if I do it too much, I definitely burn myself out with it. But if you just put on, you know, your favorite TV show, podcast, music, whatever, you can really just do this very mindlessly, which is quite nice. It's a very mindless activity. You don't have to, like, you do have to think about it, but you don't have to like really think about it. It's kind of just a mindless little puzzle that you're putting together, which is the nice part about it. Okay, so now that I have my piece pretty put together, I've been kind of eyeballing whether or not this will fit on here, and it should fit pretty well now. So I really should have this not cut on fold. I do this for like my normal baby tees, but it's really annoying for my patchwork ones. So what I'm gonna do is kind of cut around it or like draw it out. So I try to maximize this as much as I possibly can, so I get it as close to like every edge as possible. I'm gonna chalk this out. Then I'll add a couple of pins just for like safety of trying to remember where this center point is. And then move this over, line it up, and it fits pretty perfectly. So now I can just actually cut it out, and I'll have my front of my baby tee ready. And some of these pieces, like this one, is pretty usable still, so I'll keep this in my like to be used pile. Same with obviously this side of it all as well. This I can use for the back pretty easily. This can be my like starting point, but I'm gonna take off this little bit, and this goes in my I can't use any more pile all the way back there. So I'm gonna move this over and then finish cutting this out. This is not super usable. Like, yes it is, but I try to not do like terribly tiny pieces, so that's gonna go in my not usable anymore pile. This is still pretty usable. I'll keep that there. Just take off this little piece. So now if we take off our pattern piece, we have our front here. Now we do the same thing for the back, and then we just assemble the whole piece. But it's a very tedious process. Up here I did start to get into like the very tiny pieces territory, but I try to not do that too much. Also just because of like sensory issues. Like I just feel like if you have too much patchwork, like stuff like this gets a little bit too, it's not uncomfortable or itchy, but I don't know, sometimes it's just like a bit much. So I'm gonna do the other side really quickly, and then we'll finish this up. Okay, here is the final top. It's so cute. I love that these turn out different every time. Like every single person has a unique one when they order this. I think it's so fun, so cute. Here's the back of it. I have ironed it out. I'm probably gonna press it one more time before I send this one off because this one's in order. But so cute. We love this. This is one of my favorite things to do with all of my scraps, especially with my knit fabric or stretch fabric scraps. It's a lot easier to patchwork, a lot quicker. I haven't patchworked as much with my woven fabric scraps, but honestly, I use a lot of knits, which is unintentional, but I love a knit fabric. I like comfort, and I find that knit fabrics tend to be comfier. They're just quite easy to work with. So this is it. I don't have the pattern for this baby tee out yet, but I do plan on putting it out eventually, so stay tuned for that. And if you're wondering how I do these double hems, I do have a tutorial up on that. Last year I did 12 days of tutorials for Vlogmas, and I have a bunch of tutorials up now, and I also did a whole series a couple years ago on a bunch of other tutorials and things, so those are available to you. I have a whole playlist of them. It's called Fashion Design 101. I'll link it down below for you if you're curious about that, because I do get asked a lot about tutorials, and I do have them up. You just gotta dig for them. I do plan on doing more soon though, so stay tuned. But this is the top. I'm gonna send this off now and gonna sort through the scraps that I created, move all the smaller, scrappier scraps into my big bin of scraps, and then the ones that are still usable I'll keep in the bag to reuse again the next time I make more of these shirts. I was gonna make more today, but I just don't feel like it, so it's just gonna be a one and done for the day. But yeah, that is one of my main zero waste techniques to try to keep my brand as sustainable as I possibly can. If you have bigger scraps, I think one of the best ways to utilize them is making scrunchies or little accessories. So I rummaged through my fabric closet the other day and picked out a bunch of fabrics that are just like, there's like just little bits of them, right? Like it's only about this much. I can't like make a full garment out of it, but it's a decent amount of fabric. Same with like this one. Bits like this is where I'll usually make a little scrunchie set out of. This one has a little bit more. I could probably do something with this one, but will I do something with it? Probably not, which is also something I always have to ask myself, like, yes, it's enough fabric, but will I actually use it? I don't know. Same with this one. I think this one, I didn't even buy. This one was gifted to me. But again, just like, is it enough to probably make one nice thing out of? Yeah, but like, but maybe I really could. I could make a little dress out of it. Maybe I keep this one. Now I'm debating actually keeping this one to make something out of. You know what? This one we're gonna put to the side. But these I am gonna cut out to make scrunchies. So I recently figured out that my best formula in terms of the size of it is roughly like 5 inches by like 27 inches or so. Sometimes I'll change it up depending on just like the actual width of the fabric. Like if this doesn't give me up until 27 inches, then like I'll do whatever the width is. This one, for example, the max length is 29, so it works out pretty well. But if it was a little bit less, I would just cut it to that length. And then I also try to figure out this piece. If you can see, it's not like a perfect rectangle, but I'm gonna try to make it a perfect rectangle and then see how much I can make out of it. So I'm gonna bring you down to this table so you can see what I'm doing. Basically, if I have this piece, I'm gonna try to figure out a straight point here and here to make it a perfect rectangle. So I'm gonna use the lines on my table to kind of like help guide me. So I'm gonna cut this excess off. And then up here, I'm gonna find like my lowest point between these kind of like bits that come in is this one. I'm gonna try to line everything up with this same line on the table, which you cannot really tell, but there's like a line right here. So I'm gonna try to line it up with that, which is the same as this line over here. I'm gonna like low-key mark that, which is like right around here. So I'm just gonna roughly, I'll just go for it and hope for the best here. Oh shit, I should have done the top. Oh well, whatever. Okay, my camera cut off, but basically now I take this rectangular piece here that I've basically trued and I figure out this width. So this is 13 inches, which if I do 5 and 5, it leaves me with an awkward like 3 left. So I could just make these bigger scrunchies and do like a 6.5 by 6.5 and just make them bigger. Or I can, you know, you do the normal length, but then I'll just have this weird extra. And I think because this is a slightly thicker fabric, I don't want to go any bigger. But if it was a flimsier fabric, something like this that's a little more lightweight, I wouldn't mind going bigger because it scrunches nicely, but this one's a bit thicker, so I don't really want to do that. So I'm just gonna mark my 5 inches. I am low-key mad because had I cut this properly and had those extra 2 inches, I could have gotten 3 full scrunchies out of this, but I just feel like the 3 inch is really small and I don't really like the length of it. So we're just not gonna do it, which is fine. So now I have both of my strips here. I'm gonna do the same for these 2 fabrics and just cut out a few strips, and then we're just gonna make a few scrunchies to get these scraps kind of sorted. And then these extra bits just will go into my scraps pile and I'll use them for other projects, but at least we got these bits ready to be used again. Okay, I made a few of these. So these are the new colors that we've got. This is the nice little like jacquard fabric that's a little bit thicker. It turned out really cute. Here's the striped fabric, also very cute, and the green silky satin. And I can't remember if this is real silk or not. I'm gonna have to do a little burn test to figure that one out. Very cute, very nice. I made a few others last week as well with other fabrics that I had. So this is from the Silver Megan dresses, like the leftover bits from when I cut those out. Turned out really cute. This fabric I got at an estate sale recently because I thought it would be cute for scrunchies, and it is. And then this is silk. This one I can confirm is silk. Also scraps from a sample that I've been making out of this fabric. So here's some fun new scrunchies, which are a great way to get rid of fabric scraps, but also just a cute accessory and a good kind of like easy purchase for people. Like I find whenever people can't spend money on an entire garment, or maybe they like my content and they like what I do, but my pieces aren't particularly their style, whatever it may be, usually scrunchies are the one thing that people will always buy no matter what your style is, no matter like what your budget is, because it's usually the cheapest item. So these are good for using up your scraps, but also as like an easy purchase on your website. Like I think it's always good to have kind of low budget, easier purchases for people if they just want to support, especially if you're a business that does content and people relate to you online and they really want to support, but maybe they just can't afford your product or whatever. Like it's just good to have little things that people can still purchase to feel like they're a part of your community and a part of your brand without breaking the bank. So that to me is scrunchies. So these have been been really cute. I've been working on so many of these lately. I used to make so many of them when I first started my brand, and then I just kind of fell off the grid with them, forgot about them, and now I'm back and they're so cute and so fun. So I'm gonna make some more of these. But yeah, that is one of my easiest ways to get rid of scraps. Works every time and they always sell out pretty well. For our absolute scrappiest project, I'm not gonna give you a full rundown of how I do this because I do have a whole separate tutorial, but I make these cute little pillows, and this is a great way to not just use up the scrappiest scraps, but also your weird like 1 yard cut off fabrics. Like this one I got at an estate sale that I've had for a while. I've also made these with, again, a weird offcut that I had of fabric. So this is a really great project to get rid of a lot of scraps. Firstly being your like bigger yardages, but also your small teeny tiny scraps. My best tip for it though is that if you really want them to be usable, like comfortable pillows, I do find that using only fabric scraps will make it really kind of like hard and mushy, not very comfortable. So if you are wanting it to be very functional, I do recommend using like maybe half polyfill, half fabric scraps, or maybe like a 3/4 fabric scraps, a quarter of polyfill, just to help soften it a little bit. That's what I do for mine, mostly because I was able to get polyfill secondhand from a friend who like didn't need it anymore, had bought it for something and just didn't need it and gave it to me. So I don't know if I'd go out of my way to go buy it, but I do find that it makes it a lot more comfortable. So that is my one tip for it, but it's one of the easiest ways to get rid of those teeny tiny scraps that you feel like you can't use for anything else. Use it for stuffing pillows. You can make little stuffed animals. You can make a lot of different stuffing type things, and obviously a lot of different shapes and things. I've also used it to make little letter pillows for my friends. Like I've used it for so many things. So that is my best way of using my scrappiest fabrics, because everything can be used. You just have to be a little bit more creative. So I hope this was helpful in reminding you that all of your fabric scraps can be used, because I know that most sewers, crafters, people that utilize fabrics in any way tend to keep their scraps even outside of just like sustainability reasons. I feel like we all feel like we can use it at some point, but we never actually push ourselves to use it. So hopefully this gives you the little push you needed to actually sort through everything and use it, because everything can be used. And I would love to know what other ways you guys use your fabrics. I know that there's a million other ways that you could use them up. There's a lot of things I still want to try with some of my fabrics and scraps and things. So let me know what you guys do. I would love to hear it. But yeah, that is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!